Alright, welcome back. This is Module 5. It's going to be Lab 3A, and we're going to be performing NMAP scanning of our targets. And this is where we have now performed our reconnaissance against our target. Now, of course, that wasn't our actual targets we're using here, but we've gone through some of that process to get familiar with it. Now, at this point in time, we're going to actually spin up all of our VMs, and now we're going to start scanning from our attack system to locate our targets and get some IP addresses assigned to them. Again, everything is DHCP. We might have some fluctuation in addresses as we move through further labs, but NMAP is a pretty simple tool to use, and we can always run back and rediscover if we have to complete future labs. To do this, what we're going to have to do is get VMware up and running. VMware player here, I'm going to go ahead and select it. You'll see it kick up, and now I have my 3 systems in here. Okay, we got our attack system, and we got our 2 targets. Best thing to do, select this attack system, edit virtual machines, go over to this network adapter, and place this into a host only. This is where we're going to want to start from. Go ahead and hit OK. You can start that virtual machine. While that's starting, we're going to have to start up a second instance of VMware Player. You got a couple options. I keep VMware Player down here in my taskbar, so I can right click, select the operating system I want to start, and go ahead and start it up. I can also right click, select VMware Player, and if you notice here, give it just a second before I upset it here. Here's our attack system. We got if it ain't broke. That one's running. We're going to get easy peasy this time and hit power on. The first time you run these VMs, you're going to get this message. It basically recognizes that this VM was not created on this host system you're running now. So simply say I copied it. Say I copied it here. VMware Tools is not a bad deal to install on this guy here. It's not going to let me do anything until I choose download and install. See if it'll let me move it. Yeah, I can slide it around a little bit now. Got 1 target, 2 targets, and an attack system. I'm going to let this guy finish loading here. Let's come over here and log in. Remember your credentials for your username and your password. And we should be just about ready to get going here. You see you have a login prompt down here. You will not need to log into this guy at all. This one over here, we can click and log in. We will not need to do that, because think about what's going on here. We're going to scan a network. This is our target network. So here's what happens. We can walk into a facility. Maybe they just have ports there and available, and we plug in a laptop and we get ready to start work. Or we might have some kind of entry point into the network, and we have access to a particular subnet within the network. So in either case, we wouldn't really see these machines. They wouldn't be in front of us. Now, for our labs, we're going to have them in front of us as a safety net in case we have to get in there and do anything. But for the most part, we're just going to leave those guys running in the background untouched, and we should be good to go. One of the first things we're going to want to do here with our target, because we're going to start performing scans, is we want to protect ourselves. We want to know we are not communicating with the outside world. We are not connected to the internet actively at this time. So I'm going to ping 8.8.8.8 Google's DNS. Network is unreachable. That's a good sign. I also would want to come over here and start up this web browser. You don't necessarily have to go this far. I would like to just confirm. The other message is basically telling me, hey, we can't get off to a public-faced internet. But let's double check. We're good. That page isn't loaded as of yet. I think we're going to be good to go. The other thing I'm going to want to do here is run an ifconfig /a. The purpose here is I want to know what my IP address is, because I'm going to want to write that down so that when I start performing my scans, I will not have any interest in determining what services are running on this guy right now. This is my attack system. I would be familiar with it. I need to simply find other systems and find out what they have running on them. At this point, I think we're getting to a start point. The tool that we're going to use is NMAP. NMAP is basically a network scanning application that is pretty powerful. We can use it not only to discover hosts, but we can find out services. We might be able to do some OS fingerprinting on it, find out with our scanning TCP ports and UDP ports, discover if they're open and available or not. If you want to know all about NMAP, how to use NMAP, you can type in MAN NMAP. You will get the entire manual right there in front of you. Spacebar to move through, Q if you want to quit. Let's go ahead and begin with a very basic TCP connect scan against our subnet range. We saw from this guy up here, our mask is a standard class C. Our address is 192.168.40.128. We're going to scan everything from 40.1 all the way through 40.254. There's a few different ways we can do that. First off, let's put our command in. NMAP, that's initiating the actual application to start up. -S, so now we're telling the application or the tool we want to perform a scan. We're selecting a capital T, meaning we want to perform a TCP connect scan. We're going to do this against, I'm not going to list any specific ports, meaning that it's going to grab the first 1,000. If you don't specify a port, it's grabbing ports 1 through 1,000. 192.168, I think we're in 40, right? Now we can do it a couple different ways. 40, we can go /24, meaning we're going to use a CEDAR notation 24. We're specifying this is the network, this is the mask value, the /24 is the mask value for that network, and that tells the application the range. Or we can simply say 1-254 and specify specific IP addresses in case our range was, our network was much larger than a class C. We could chop it down and say, you know what, I don't really only need to scan 1 through 20. Let's let it run. As NMAP is running, it's basically going to send TCP connects to any IP address listed within that range and all 1,000 ports on each of those IP addresses, so that it can say, out of all the IP addresses available, these are what are coming back as live. Here are the ports on those systems that are live, that are there and available. As you can see, it didn't take too long. 254 IP addresses. It found 5 hosts. 1, 2, 3. What's going on here? Well, you're going to find a few of these are not going to be of interest to us. Let's start from the top and work our way down. So we're seeing all 1,000 scan ports on 192.168.40.1 are filtered, and it's actually giving you a MAC address, and that MAC address is associated back to VMware. So that's probably the VMware router that's sitting in front of this subnet here. That one we're not interested with, so scratch that one off the list. We do not need to go any deeper with that. Now we did find this 192.168.40.129. We see NetBIOS SSN, Microsoft DS, okay, MSRPC. Alright, that sounds like that's probably a Windows-based workstation, but we'll confirm that here in just a moment. We also have 192.168.40.130 with, well, we got a lot of different pieces open here. And some of the items that I'm seeing look pretty enticing. I see VNC, I see a simple SQL, I see a MySQL, I see an NFS, shell, wow, right there open on a port. Okay, NetBIOS, RPC bind, and HTTP, SMTP, Telnet, SSH. This box has all kinds of things, and a lot of these sound server related. When I start thinking of SMTP being there and available, HTTP being there and available, we got a few things in there that might open our eyes. We'll also see that we have a 192.168.40.254. 254, the first and the last address of your subnets within VMware are going to be assigned to VMware based devices. Don't worry about them. Scratch that one off the list as well. Here's the 5th. Scan report for 40.128. Well, that sounds familiar. That's actually this attack system, so he actually scanned himself in this. So there's ways that we can exclude addresses as well so that we don't include them in future scans. Here's what you're going to want to do. Get the address down for this guy, get the address down for this guy. Don't have to necessarily write in OS and who they are related to as of yet, because we're going to confirm that information here in just a little bit. But that gives us a very good beginning for our scanning. Let's go ahead and figure out exactly what these devices are. Remember, we have a .129, a .130 of interest here. So let's see how we're going to perform a scan when we're just looking at those two, and we're going to try to determine the operating system that is running. If I do a -O, that's going to try to fingerprint the operating system so we can confirm what these guys are. We want to know what the OS is that's actually running, because that will tell us what types of scans we can actually continue to run against them that should be successful. You see, I got my first address in here, and I'm going to put a dash, and I'm going to specify the second address. Your addresses might differ slightly. Pay attention to what has come back for you and use those. While NMAP is running, you can hit the space bar, and space bar will actually give you some verbose information on the screen. It will tell you where we are in the scan, how much longer the scan should be running, how far we've made it thus far. Here we go, 15.96 seconds. We got 2 devices scanned. So what did we find out? Well, this particular network, our target that we're looking at, we have an address of 192.168.40.129. We found out some ports that are open, and we are fingerprinting this guy as a Microsoft Windows XP or 2003. You see, we got a little more specific down here. We got some pretty good information there. Let's see what this is. 192.168.40.130. We got some information right here on what operating system is running there. So as of right now, it looks like we might have a Linux server and perhaps a Windows XP SP2 desktop. Let's go ahead and run another scan here. Let's find out what versions of these services are actually running. To do that, again, we're going to initiate NMAP by starting the command out. We're going to do a lowercase s, capital T, capital V. We're doing a TCP connect scan again, and we're looking for version-based information this time for 192.168.40.129 through 130. Let's hit enter. Again, if you want to see the progress, if this happens to be hanging and taking a while for you, hit your space bar. You'll get some information coming back. Version scans are going to take a little bit longer. I'm going to pause right here and come back once I have a completed scan. Alright, so as you can see here, this took a couple minutes, but finished up on the 2 addresses. We have not only a port and a state of that port, but the service running and a version of the service that's running. SSH, we're running open SSH 4.7. You might see something like Pro FTPD 131. So that's pretty helpful. If you think about it. Now we found a device, we know that it's running TCP, we know a port is open, it's waiting for instruction or connections to come to it. We now know what version it's running. So we could almost take that information and start looking online and finding what kind of vulnerabilities are associated to that service at that version. You guys will find this one to be pretty interesting, as we will be exploiting that later in the class. I believe we're also going to work on this VNC one as well. Now keep in mind that we're looking at one side of the house here. A couple things actually. We're looking at just 1,000 ports right now. We could expand this out to scan all of the ports available in the system. You know there's 65,536 ports of interest, 0 through 65,535. So we can go that route, Also understand that this is just TCP. We have UDP to consider as well. UDP is a little tougher to scan because what happens with TCP is we send a packet to actually request communications. That port, if it's open and available, will respond back, and then we will confirm. So that's the send, SYNAC, ACK process where we actually create a handshake, a three-way handshake that starts that communication process. UDP does not work the same way. UDP, it's a quick way of pushing communications to and from one device to another, but not with any reliability. We're not doing any checks to see if the packet make it. That handshake process allows us to acknowledge packets with TCP. UDP, not so much. But we're going to do some UDP scans as well because we want to know, are there any vulnerable ways of getting in that way? In other words, TCP, maybe we just checked all the doors to the home or the facility. Now we want to check all the windows too. We want to make sure that this facility is secured. We want to make sure our customer site is secured before we start trying to penetrate it and come up with areas of interest for ourselves. So let's look at a UDP scan. Let's go ahead and scan down here. Again, let's initiate NMAP. We're going to do a scan, but we're going to specify we want a UDP scan. So you saw the capital T was for a TCP Connect scan. This is going to be a UDP based scan. And we're going to go ahead and look for versions at this same time. 192, 168, 40 dot, and what are our two devices of interest here? 129 and 130. UDP scans will take longer as well, as there is no confirmation that's coming back and forth. So we're going to send a packet, we're going to see if we get some kind of response back or not. If we do not get responses back, that doesn't mean necessarily that the port is closed. We're going to get results that are going to say open or filtered. You got to think about one other piece here. Even with the TCP communications in our scans, firewalls could be in here playing a role in this. We could have ports that are maybe open and available, but we have firewalls that are not allowing these pings to come through, these scans to come through. So let's see what we got here. I'm going to pause and resume once my scan is finished. Alright, so here we are. This is about 21 minutes later. UDP scans take a while. Here's the deal. If we look up here, we can see what was identified as a Windows-based operating system here. We can see that we have some UDP ports open and listening. These are open filtered. Now filtered does not mean closed. Filtered means that we would have to run other scans to determine if they are actually open or not. We look over here, but a service actually is associated to that port. If we look back over here, for our Linux-based system, we have about 4 that are listed. You will notice UDP as one of them, 53, UDP, that's DNS. So this kind of confirms that this system here, a server at that point in time. We'll perform one last scan, and this is the scan that you'll actually submit. I'm going to come back here and we're going to do another NMAP. Again, we're initiating the application to start. Let's go ahead and we'll run another UDP based scan. This time we will run it against both addresses again. And we are also looking for some output. We want something that we can have a file in front of us that we'll actually be able to review and look at. So we're going to do a dash, a little o. That's specifying an output. From there, it wants to know the file name and version of this output. What are we going to do with it? Where is it going to end up? Tell you what, I'm going to make an adjustment up here. We're going to do an NMAP. Let's do a lowercase o, capital X. That's basically specifying that we want to have output that's in an XML format. And we're going to name this xmascan.xml. And if this is going to be an xmascan, we now have to specify that that's the type of scan we want to run. So dash S is for scan type, capital X is for the xmascan, and we'll do a V as well for versioning. 129 through 130. So I'll take a moment before I hit enter so that you can look at that and make sure you have it down. And let's hit enter. And we're going to start running the scan. Again, if you want to know progress, space bar so you can see where we are. Now here's what's happening with these scans. We're running this on both operating systems, but here's the catch. An xmascan is not going to be effective against a Windows-based operating system because Windows does not follow the RFC rules for TCP and UDP-based communications. So an xmascan basically will flag a bunch of flags, optional flags in the packet that's being sent, and it's called Xmas because it's referred to as if it's lighting up like a Christmas tree. Okay, there's a bunch of flags that are lit, but the point behind it, what we're looking for is, as we send this, we want the UDP port on the other end, or the service on the other end, to basically send a reset back to us. If it sends a reset, that confirms to us that there is a service there and it is actually listening because it is responding back to this Xmas scan. So that's what we're hoping for. If they don't send a reset back, then that means most likely it's not an open port that is there and available for us to use. This is going to take a while. I'm going to pause this. We're going to start this video back up once it's done, and I'll show you where your output is at, and this becomes your deliverable that you're going to submit. That one didn't take as long. Now you can see here that you will be able to come back and refer to, okay, all 1,000 scan ports are closed on 129. Why? Well, we saw from a previous scan that they weren't all closed, but the Xmas scan does not work against a Windows-based OS, so that's not effective there. I just wanted to include it to show you the differences that you might come across. Here we got a lot of stuff that's responded back and available to us. To actually find this file, which you will be submitting, if you open up your file system here, scroll down, you'll see root with the little house. That means that's your home directory for that root user. There's your scan right there. And that's an XML file that you can open up and view. This will be submitted. To get it into a location to submit, if you hold down the left mouse button, drag it out to your desktop, let go, you'll see the file actually gets transferred off of your system, from your virtual system to your host system. Okay, that's part of that VMware tools doing that for you. That's how you'll want to get it out to submit it inside of our course. Now there's a lot of other little options that you can run. There's timing, so we would go from paranoid to sneaky to polite. It depends on how many seconds are in between the scans that are taking place. That's to avoid being recognized or identified on the network. Not only is there TCP scans, but there's SYN scans, there's FIN scans, there's Xmas scans. We just touched the surface. You can specify actual ports as well, what ports you want to include. You can specify if you want pings to be included or not in the scans. Lots of different things you can do. Look through your text, you're going to see a lot of those options in there. I also have them posted here in this video, at least for a reference. And from there, we're going to go ahead and stop this and move into our Nessus installation.